very welcome along to our Marine Ireland Industry Network event. This is one of our virtual events. We do 2 face-to-face events and 2 virtual events every year. And this one is specifically on upskilling for future needs of the marine sector in Ireland. The event is being recorded, so you'll be able to get a recording of it and have a second listen to it if that's your thing. There's also a Q&A element, so each presenter has 10 minutes of presentation, and then they've got we'll have a discussion for about 10 minutes around their presentation. So do please contribute, because if you don't contribute, you'll be listening to me having the discussion with the presenter, which is probably the last thing you want to do. So just to explain, I suppose, a little bit around what MIIN is for anybody who's not familiar with it. MIIN is the Marine Ireland Industry Network, and we are an umbrella organisation for the marine sector in Ireland. It's a joint initiative between a number of agencies, ourselves and Enterprise Ireland, but also critically our colleagues in the Marine Institute and especially in the IMDO. And we work together very closely on the sector and on MIIN, and other agencies are also involved as well. You're going to hear today from BIM. So it's very much a overarching umbrella organization, and we are we provide a kind of, I suppose, the big picture of what's happening in the marine sector in Ireland. So we're doing things like, if you go to our website, you will see there that we've got a news section, directory, events, jobs, basically showcasing everything that's happening in the marine space in Ireland. The website also acts as effectively a large shop window for what's happening in Ireland, and particularly so for external buyers or external people who are interested in perhaps buying a product or service from the marine sector in Ireland. They want to understand what capability there is. What we do is basically we provide that exposure, if you like, for those companies who are in the network. So if you're in the marine sector in Ireland, you need to be in our network. Like I say, we run 4 events per year, 4 networking events per year. 2 of those are virtual, 2 are face-to-face. And today's virtual event is all around skills, and in particular, skill sets for 3 specific subsectors of marine. We're going to look at, and 3 reports have been produced in the last couple of months around the skills needs for a number of specific subsectors. There's a report which was produced by BVG Associates. I'm going to have Leo Bertels in a few minutes talking about this. BVG will be well known in the industry as consultant, particularly for offshore wind. They did a piece of work for Green Tech Skill Nets and Wind Energy Ireland, a number of other players in Ireland, looking at where there were opportunities for Ireland in the offshore wind industry. What skill sets we have currently, what capability we have currently, what capability we should build, where there are gaps and challenges that we need to fill in order to maximize the benefit of that industry, not just for the marine sector, but for, I suppose, the wider community in Ireland. We've then got Paul Hegarty from NMCI. Paul, as people will know, is the new head of college there in the NMCI. And Paul is going to talk about some work they've been doing, looking at the future skills needs for mariners. So we're going to need more people with the right skills to be on board ship for all sorts of end applications, not just offshore wind or but cargo, vessels, marine engineering capability, cruise industry, you name it. We're going to need a lot of additional skills. And then we've got Caroline Bocquel, who people will know as the CEO of BIM, and she's going to talk about the whole area of skills for the seafood industry. And again, that's an absolutely critical industry for coastal communities, vital in terms of kind of employment in those small coastal communities. And she's going to talk about some work that they've done. I'll do a very quick run through of MIIN training providers at the end of the piece, and then a wrap up, and that's us done. So one thing we just to let people know, MIIN has been represented at a number of trade shows recently. We were at Oceanology in London, and as was X-Ocean and Cathix, and two companies in the network. They had a lot of traffic to their site, to their stands. And we had a lot of queries to the Marine Institute stand where I was around kind of what was generally happening in Ireland in the space. So it was good to be there to represent Ireland and talk about the Irish company's capabilities. We also had an event. We were on the stand at Bilbao. So this was Wind Europe in Bilbao. Just last week, in fact, and you can see the stand there, a very impressive stand, big Ireland stand, 150 square meters, which is very large in the stand world. And we had a lot of inquiries about what was happening in Ireland, where Ireland was going. We had a group of companies on the stand there with us. You can actually see ASL there, one of our members, but we had in total about 10 organizations on the stand. And we had the launch of the industrial strategy for offshore wind. And we also had the future framework launched as well by Minister Ryan when we were there. So a lot happening on that stand, a lot of interest in Ireland, which is great to see. Just to mention this very briefly for anybody who hasn't seen this, this is Powering Prosperity. So this is the new offshore wind industrial strategy. And Enterprise Ireland, myself and Dara Cotter and colleagues in IDA and in DETI were very heavily involved in this. I was talking to Leo Bertels there just before we came on about the strategy, and we see it very much as a starting point. If you're in the marine sector, if you're particularly interested in offshore wind, you need to have a look at this because this is an important document. It kind of sets out where we're going, the resources we're going to need, things like it highlights two kind of big ticket items, a center of excellence and a floating offshore wind demonstrator. Those are the two kind of big ticket items, but there's lots of other things in there. Lots of responsibilities for ourselves and new roles for ourselves there and for IDA and various other people. So it's the first time this has all been pulled together into a single document. So it's a great starting point. So let's go to our presenters. And we're going to start with Leo. Leo is with PVG Associates, and like I said earlier, well-known consultancy company in the offshore wind space in particular. And Leo did a piece of work, and Leo and his colleagues did a piece of work recently for Green Tech Skillnet and for Wind Energy Ireland, looking at the skills requirements that coming down the road for us in terms of offshore wind. So Leo, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Liam. And here we go. You've stolen my thunder a little bit in terms of my intro, but thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. I'm here to speak about the Building Our Potential report, which we published in January this year, which we wrote in collaboration with our project partners Beecham and GDG for Wind Energy Ireland and Green Tech Skillnet, looking at the skills, challenges, and opportunities associated with Irish offshore wind ambitions. If you could go to the next slide there, Liam. I'm gonna try and give a bit of an overview of the content of the report, but there's a lot more detail here that I'm not going to have time for. So if you are interested to read more and you haven't already seen it, do go to the Green Tech Skillnet website where you can find the full document. Also worth noting that there's going to be a very exciting online tool forthcoming in the next few weeks, where there's going to be a kind of interactive place to navigate through the phases of the offshore wind life cycle and for people to find what job opportunities might suit them in the sector. So look out for that coming through. Back to the report. So what were the aims of our report? So in order to establish what the job opportunity, the skills need is, we need to first establish what's the pipeline of projects, and where do we expect Irish companies to be participating? And this is key because obviously Irish workers won't be doing everything in what is a very complex and large-scale supply chain. So it's important to recognise the areas where Irish skills are likely to be needed before we delve into the skills challenges. So yes, the aims: establish the pipeline, establish where we think Ireland is going to participate within the supply chain, and then use those two pieces of information to identify the skills gaps and challenges. Next slide, please, Liam. So methodology: establish that capacity projection. Then we undertook a screening against each supply chain category within the offshore wind lifecycle to establish a kind of percentage level of participation for Irish workers based on an assessment of current and potential Irish supply chain capability. Within the in-depth triage against each of those sectors identified as the potential areas for Irish participation to establish the level of strength there and the level of opportunity, and then use that to establish where those skills gaps and opportunities were likely to be, for drawing some recommendations about how those gaps could be addressed and how that job opportunity could best be exploited. Next slide, please. So market projection, here it is on the graph there on the bottom left. You can see the fixed expected fixed deployment is in dark blue. The expected floating deployment is in light blue. And in what is, perhaps an increasingly controversial move, we aligned our capacity projection with government ambitions of 5 gigawatts of deployment by 2030, 20 gigawatts by 2040, and 37 by 2050. Now, I think the 2030 target in particular is looking challenging to hit, let's say, and particularly in the light of the delays there have been to the anticipated ORIS 2.1 timeline since we began this piece of work. However, what I will say about that is the job opportunities don't disappear if you delay the deployment slightly. They simply shift the timing. So the overall numbers and the overall need remains consistent, although I think we need to recognize there is a little bit of uncertainty at the moment around exactly when and exactly where those opportunities might arise. So as I said, based on that capacity projection, we undertook an initial screening of each cost category within the supply chain using a RAG rating system. Red for we don't expect Irish participation, green we expect Ireland to be heavily involved, and orange for there's an opportunity here for Ireland to participate, but there might be some things that Ireland needs to do to capture that opportunity. Based on that, our assessment was that there's very likely to be a strong Irish presence in project development and O&M. So project development and O&M both benefit reasonably strongly from being delivered locally to the site and from having workers who have local knowledge. In project development, having people who know about the regulatory frameworks and so on and so forth is an asset. In O&M, you want to minimize the distance of the trips to the wind farm, so it makes a lot of sense to do that out of an Irish port. I think the logic for local supply and project development is a bit weaker, but what we do see is there is strong Irish capability in a lot of project development areas like project management, geotechnical, geophysical surveying, and those kind of more professional type of roles. Manufacturing, installation, and decommissioning, we think less likely to see significant Irish content, basically due to a lack of established supply chain. You've got a strong North Sea offshore wind supply chain on the doorstep in Ireland, and that's an advantage in the sense of, stuff can be bought in quite easily and not prove a blocker to deployment, but it's a disadvantage in trying to build up from the ground a manufacturing supply chain when you're competing against well-established opposition. There are some areas we identified where we think it's possible for Ireland to participate. For example, in tower manufacturing, floating mooring system and floating substructure manufacture. I think what I'd say about the mooring systems and substructure manufacture in particular is for these kind of floating specific elements, they don't suffer from that disadvantage of having an established supply chain with which to compete. And there may be an opportunity for Ireland to capture a first mover advantage in these spaces if it can move quickly. When it comes to substructure manufacture, it's a very labor intensive job. The assembly, I should say specifically, and it benefits greatly from being delivered closely to the site because the costs of towing an assembled floating offshore turbine foundation is quite extensive. Ports in installation, there's an opportunity also for Ireland to participate, but there will be a need for infrastructure investment to occur in order to unlock that. And I know a number of Irish ports are looking at that, and I would probably be looking at the likes of Cork, Shannon, and Rosslare among the kind of front runners in that space. But the GDG National Ports Report, which was released 2022, I believe, goes into that in a lot more detail and is a very useful reference point on that subject. We then, using this assessment of the supply chain, we assessed each. We did develop two scenarios: a kind of business as usual scenario based on the Irish supply chain as is, and a potential scenario based on what could the jobs opportunity and the skills opportunity look like if action is taken to address these things and to capture those investments in those strategic areas we identified and to deliver that port investment to capture that construction activity as well. Next slide.
Sorry, Leo, I've got a little glitch here for some reason.
I'm conscious I'm burning through the time as well, so I'll try and go a bit quicker.
Okay.
There we go. So I mentioned that we identified particular areas of Irish opportunity. I think I've been through quite a lot of them at a high level already. But there on the left, you can see those areas were identified as either likely for strong Irish participation or an opportunity for participation. So you can see a wide range there of development and project management services. The manufacturing areas that I talked about already. The installation ports. There's also a lot of the onshore installation activity where we expect to see strong Irish participation. Ireland obviously has a very strong civil engineering sector and good capability to do that kind of onshore cable laying, onshore substation construction, and then the operations and maintenance stuff, which is almost invariably done from the kind of nearest viable port. And there on the right, you can see the triage we did against each of these sectors to establish, the likely level of Irish content within each of these areas. So we looked at each category on 6 different ratings: track record and capacity of the Irish supply chain, capability in parallel sectors, for example, in oil and gas or aerospace or marine engineering, benefit of local supply, i.e. how much sense does it make to do it locally, or how much does the economics drive that kind of activity? Current skills availability. Are there people in Ireland who can do this already? Investment risk. how big and difficult an investment is this to get across the line, and the size of the opportunity, how big a part of the overall pie of the offshore wind project does this cost category represent. Next slide, please, Liam. So here's the conclusions we reached, and you can see on the left-hand side here the overall assessment of the job opportunity in the business as usual and the intervention scenario. So you can see up to 2040, which is where we modeled the jobs to, we're looking at just over 80,000 FTE years of employment for Irish workers over the course of the lifetime of these projects. In the intervention scenario, we're looking at more than 140,000, and you can see the big difference there is in the manufacturing phase, which is the orange. The development and project management and the O&M phases, the purple and the red, make up a sizable chunk in both, but the manufacturing grows a large amount between the two as we see those factory investments being captured. And there on the right hand side, you can see the profile over time. Bit difficult to read. The left hand column is the BAU, and the right hand column is the intervention scenario. And you can see over time, the BAU and intervention scenarios diverge as there becomes a greater proportion of workers working in that manufacturing sector. Next slide, please, Liam. On the back of those assessments of the key areas where we expect Irish participation, we identified 40 key job roles which are likely to be done in Ireland and which could, if the skills can't be found, represent a blocker to deployment. So I won't go through all of these in detail, but you can see on the left-hand side there, you've got more of the kind of development and consenting type roles, bid managers, marine ecologists, ornithologists, people who can go out there and write those environmental impact assessments and so on. In the middle there, you've got the more kind of manufacturing and installation type roles. And the right-hand side, you've got those that are associated with the O&M phase. And that's where the marine skills will come in most prominently with the able seafarers, master mariners, harbour pilots, boat maintenance, so on and so forth. Next slide, please, Liam. So I'm just going to run through very quickly the kind of shortages and profiles within each life cycle phase. So in development and project management, we've got all the jobs there over time on the left. A lot of colors going on there, but broadly, I think the takeaway is that it's reasonably flat. As you have a steady pipeline of projects coming out, you need a reasonably flat number of people across the period. And it, you know, hanging around the kind of well, 700 FTE year per year mark when you combine those two graphs. We had to have two because all the jobs wouldn't fit on one graph. The key skills shortages that we identified here, and it's worth mentioning that we identified the shortages through a campaign of engagement with developers and supply chain. Management skills and senior roles, electrical skills, engineering skills, surveying, and the analysis of the results of those surveys. Next slide, please, Liam. So here you see quite a different picture in the manufacturing, where there's a huge difference between the business as usual, which are the small left-hand bars, and the intervention scenarios. You can see that in the intervention scenario, you're getting about 180 FTE years per year in the high scenario, whereas the BAU scenario is only getting up to about 20. You can see that big blue bar there is welders, and that relates to the assembly of floating wind foundations, which requires a lot of welders. Bit of a question about where all those welders might come from, but I think also as we see cost out happening in floating, it's likely that ways will be found to make that process, less labor intensive, and it's possible that innovation will lead to a need for fewer welders. So the skill shortages in that space, skilled trade workers, people with offshore qualifications, people with construction management skills, and electrical expertise. Next slide, please, Liam. So in the installation, again, you see a reasonably big difference between the business as usual and the intervention scenarios, and this is consistent with seeing that investment happening in Irish ports, such that a lot more of that installation work can happen domestically, and that leads to those right-hand bars seeing a big increase in the need for port operatives, which is I think if you could drill down into that and probably get to a more granular level of detail, but it's generally people who work in and around the port handling cargo. We don't anticipate any major skill shortages in this area. The key challenge is getting that infrastructure investment across the line, which can be a difficult thing to do, as the UK experience has shown. Next slide, please. OMS job roles. So you can see in this one, there's little difference between the business as usual and the intervention scenario. But what you can see is a kind of a rising curve of roles, and that's because these OMS roles extend over the 35-year lifetime of the project. So as you get more and more projects in the water, you need more and more OMS workers, because the jobs kind of stack up, rather than being for a few years and then you move on to the next project. You'll be needed for a whole career, basically working on a single offshore wind farm in the OMS field. The skill shortages in this area, again, it's maritime training, health and safety expertise, skilled trade workers, and electrical skills. Next slide, please. So what does all this mean for Ireland? What should it do to exploit the skills opportunity? So I think our centerpiece recommendation is to take an industry government joined up approach to skills, not to go off and create a whole load of new courses, potential empty chairs in funded programs. What you need to do is match the supply to the demand. With the uncertainties I mentioned earlier around the timing of deployment and exactly where projects are going to be and when, the skills approach should be reactive, and make sure that there's a job at the end of it. Otherwise, people may not take the training up at all, or if they do take the training up and find there's no job, then they may retrain, move to a different sector, move abroad, and then you haven't achieved your goal of skilling up the offshore wind sector. In the short term, attracting foreign workers to help plug short-term skill shortages if necessary, and the development and project management work that's going on at the moment, there are some real and present shortages there, and as deployment ramps up, there may be more which emerge. In the medium term, it's really about getting projects in the water, and that's what this first bullet is about. If you want people to invest seriously in skills, and if you want people to become really interested in training and joining the offshore wind industry, you need to demonstrate the ability to deliver. And I'm not questioning that, but I think it's fair to say that Ireland is awaiting the real start of its large scale offshore wind rollout, and I think once the ball gets rolling on that, it will become a lot easier to identify the skills gaps and to entice people into the industry. Investment support schemes targeting those strategic areas I mentioned, ports in particular, but also those manufacturing opportunities and those first mover potential areas in floating. Ensuring offshore specialisms are covered in higher education, further education. So it's not about making new offshore wind courses, but about making sure that existing engineering courses have an offshore wind module or an offshore engineering module for those who are interested in going in that direction. And assess the training parallels with other expanding industries. So Ireland's got a very strong aviation sector, as we know, but perhaps a less dynamic oil and gas sector, but that's something where a lot of people have moved in the UK, and it's important to be aware of those opportunities and those parallels where people can move over. In the long term, it's important to do awareness raising to let people know that offshore wind is a growing opportunity and it's a good place for young people to seek to begin a career. Making sure the health and safety legislation is relevant to offshore wind. I think the current health and safety legislation is more than 20 years old and doesn't have any offshore wind specific content in it at the moment. And finally, building an HV and an HVDC knowledge base. High voltage is going to be the new thing in offshore wind. As projects get bigger and they get further out from shore, more and more are choosing to use HVDC. There's a global shortage of these kind of skills, and Ireland is going to need them as much as anyone. So there's a great opportunity to become a leader in that field, or at least to de-risk Ireland's own delivery by upskilling domestic workforce in that field. That's it from me, Liam. Sorry, I've massively blown my time budget.
No, you're okay, Leo. Don't worry about that. I'm going to throw a quick question to you. Your report there lays out two scenarios. So you've got the business as usual scenario, and then you've got the intervention scenario, right? Have you had a look at Ireland's industrial strategy on offshore wind? And if you have, do you think it hits those intervention requirements that would enable us to hit those much higher gains?
I have had a look at it, and I think you used the word in your intro, Liam, that it's the phrase that it's a good start.
Yeah.
And I think I would echo that. I think it's good that I think it seems that the Irish government is definitely recognising the opportunity that's here, and recognising that there's a need to act, and that's the first step. I think for me, the offshore wind strategy on its own is not enough to hit the intervention scenario.
Right.
But it does set out some actions that can get us moving in the right direction. And I think the work that DeFerris is doing around skills, and I know it's set up a number of task force on that, and that's mentioned in the industrial strategy, is an example of the kind of thing. Also setting up national clusters. Think these things are a really good idea, but I think for me, I would have liked to see a little bit more specificity around what specific investments the Irish government is going to go out and try and capture, and where exactly it wants to try to compete. Because I think people always say a strategy which tries to do everything is not really a strategy. And what you're not going to do is kind of as important as what you are in the light of limited resource. So I would have liked to see a bit more kind of drilling down into the specific opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is that can come in time. That will happen in time, where we begin to kind of become much more specific in terms of actions out of the strategy. Anyway, listen, thanks very much, Leo. Really appreciate that. Really interesting report there in terms of where we are with that whole area. We're going to move on now to, if I can get my slides to advance. For some reason, they're not advancing. Oh. Sorry, apologies, everybody. Bear with me. Sorry, there we go. Hopefully everybody can now see Maritime College, Paul Hegarty, and I hope we have Paul online. Paul, are you there?
I am indeed, Liam.
Okay, good man. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Paul Hegarty, new head of the Maritime College down in Ringaskiddy. And Paul's done a piece of work on, sorry, he hasn't done a piece of work specifically, but a piece of work has been done on future skills requirements for mariners in the maritime sector. So, Paul, please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Liam. If you want to go to the next slide, please, Liam. Yeah, next slide, please, Liam. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you all here today at the MIIN event, looking at future skills across the maritime. So I suppose, like any organisation that's involved in maritime education and training, it's trying to understand your why, your purpose, or why you exist. So for us, the maritime is kind of one snapshot, and if one picture can paint 1,000 words, the one in front of you certainly can. The maritime industry has changed a lot in the last 20 odd years since the National Maritime College of Ireland has been built. Of course, the maritime education and training in Ireland has been delivered for almost 100 years, originally starting back in Dún Laoghaire, before ultimately moving to kind of Cork in the mid-1950s, and then through a national task force in 1997, which identified a need. Again, much kind of reflecting on some of the thoughts that have been raised in various working groups nationally, but also just recently there by Leo, is that there needs to be economies of scale. We're a small island with a small population. We need to make sure we get bang for a buck. So again, the decision nearly 25 years ago now was to create the NMCI, which was a joint venture between what was CIT at the time, now Munster Technological University, and the Naval Service. And that's important as we move on the slides in a second as to why that strategic partnership is a key enabler as to what the NMCI does. But again, looking at the picture in front of you, the maritime industry has changed, and indeed how mariners themselves work and evolve. You have traditional shipping, traditional services, you have your port services, you then have maritime autonomous surface ships, MAS, you have unmanned vessels, you have offshore, you have subsurface, which everyone forgets. The maritime is a unique working environment in the sense that you can have a whole infrastructure subsurface, which requires lots of administration, lots of maintenance, lots of ongoing kind of operations. So again, the future mariner will serve lots of many purposes, and that goes across the cross-cutting skills with the engineering, but also with the traditional, the deck side. So just bearing that picture in mind, we move on to the next slide, please, Liam. So we at the NMCI are looking to see where we fit in the bigger scheme of things and how that all is meant to work for us. So as the next slide comes up there in a second.
Sorry, Paul.
You're all right. It's okay.
You're a bit glitchy today for some reason in terms of slide advancing.
It's okay. No worries.
Apologies about this, everybody. One of those things when you're going live.
It's all right. I can keep talking until this. Yeah, I hope this comes up. So long story short, keeping that picture, the initial picture in mind, if you imagine that's us on the left as you look at the slide, the red eye, and that's us 30 years in the future, the red eye on the right. So what we're trying to do is ensure that from a training perspective, we're very efficient and effective with how we develop the skill set, but also how we develop the facilities to make sure we can meet that. So the whole idea is that as you look backwards from the future, you try and minimize the resolution of detail, because obviously, I suppose it enlarges as you go further into the future. So what you're trying to do is by looking from our current position and from the future, backwards from the future, we identify the key opportunities that underpin where the college must go. So we're currently in the process of developing an NMCI strategy, which will bring us out to 2029. That will obviously be closely aligned to MTU's, our parent college's kind of strategy. But as we look to the future, you're going to have global maritime strategic trends. You're going to have national education policy, national policy such as the industrialization strategy, which was recently released. That all has key roles. Even the BVG report, which thankfully outlines the role that the NMCI can play moving forward with the whole concept of ORE in Ireland. But again, it's understanding what those different policies and reports can bring and how we bring that together to develop the NMCI. And I suppose the core underpinning central core funding of that is funding, how the funding is developed and how that evolves to make sure that facilities are fit for purpose, but also not just the facilities, and something we'll touch on later on, is that attracting the right people to the roles. If we can go to next slide, please, Liam. So just giving an overview of where the college is and where we're going for technologies. That's an overview as to where the various technologies are within the maritime sector. Next slide, please, Liam. So if we focus on the right-hand side of that overview first, again, as I said at the start, a lot of maritime colleges internationally are now starting to kind of mimic or certainly replicate the model we have here in Ireland, where you're starting to bring naval and commercial shipping entities together. Obviously, there's clear, I suppose, economies of scale can be realized there with respect to the development of technologies, development of systems. I appreciate that the naval or the maritime or the military elements can be developed further afield if basic concepts are understood and known. But again, why not have those economies of scale elsewhere nationally, creating national centres of excellence for ORE or the maritime? We certainly believe in the college we're well positioned to support that and develop that moving forward. But again, this idea of clusters is something that makes a lot of sense and should be explored further. Again, looking to the right of that screen, you'll see a lot of the technologies that exist across the maritime. Some of that kind of marine biotechnology, etc., is more focused to other areas that I'm sure Caroline will touch on. But again, looking at the autonomous vessels, autonomous vehicles, sensor technologies and communication systems that underpin it. If we go to the next slide there, please, Liam, you can see how all those systems come together and ultimately support where the maritime industry is going. The slide you're now looking at, which is the left-hand side of the overview, which was 2 slides ago, shows where the maritime industry is going. Smart shipping, efficient energy management systems, they're all becoming very important as to how future ships are designed, developed. And that'll obviously play a key role, not only in maritime shipping internationally, but also kind of within the development of ORE. Again, a lot of pictures you're going to see from the various briefs and speakers that, and particularly Leo just recently, everything to do with the delivery of ORE offshore in Ireland will be supported by mariners and the maritime industry. I think it's worth noting that the maritime economy to Ireland's worth just under €5 billion. There's 32,000 people employed in that. And shipping and maritime transport are a key enabler of that, probably one of the biggest elements of Ireland's maritime economy. Like, as you look around, if you're in home or in an office right now, most of the things surrounding you probably came here on a ship. So again, understanding how these technologies are evolving to underpin the maritime industry and the shipping industry will be very important moving forward. I suppose the last elements of that I think personally will be very important for the maritime industry moving forward, and in particular the NMCI, will be the cyber, electronics, Internet of Things, blockchain technology, automation, robotics. That is the future of the maritime. Personally, I see by the time Ireland gets to rolling out its ORE, I think there'll be a lot of automation involved in the operations and maintenance side of it. And if we can move on to the next slide, please, Liam. It's just, again, it's important to understand where that goes. So I suppose looking at the college and where we're going, it's important, like Ireland is missing a strategic skills strategy for the maritime, and it's something we've worked with the IMDO and the Department of Transport on trying to kind of come to some sort of conclusion on. Hopefully there's a report being prepared on that, and hopefully there might be some light shed on where that needs to go in the future. But that's very important because it helps you create the career paths with individuals can get their base core foundation, and then where they can build from that, reflecting on the previous slides. A term I've coined below is onboarding to offboarding. It's important that when people come on board or come into the maritime training environment, that they can learn the basic skills, be it engineering, trainee deck officers, technical officers, and that we give them an opportunity to develop to offboarding, where they decide through personal reasons or financial reasons or other career opportunities that they want to proceed into jobs ashore. I suppose a key issue and probably a key obstacle to this is nationally, it's only in the last 3 to 5 years with the onset of ORE that Ireland's realised it's an island. I know some people may laugh at that, but it's true. We do have a sea blindness which underpins our national culture, and historically we've been very agri-focused and kind of inward looking. So again, it's developing that idea of clusters, and we at the NMCI are looking for opportunities to work with other people nationally to develop a national footprint where we can bring, I suppose, the high quality, the expertise, the competence we have with maritime training, and use that to further support other industries and other potential stakeholders nationally. So for us, it's been a key focus, and I know some people have said it to us, we are creating a new narrative about where the NMCI needs to go. our raison d'etre for existing is the revision of maritime education and training skills to meet the current and future national need. So we've done that for the last 20 years in the NMCI and the 100 years previous when Ireland had maritime training nationally. We now need to build on that and reimagine the vision for the NMCI for the next 20. Next slide there, please, Liam. So with that, it comes on developing our future offerings. So obviously what underpins the core traditional maritime qualifications such as marine engineering, marine electrical, electronic engineering, and the ship, your nautical studies, which is your ship driving side of the house. We believe that there's room there for developing national apprenticeships. It's not lost on us that we've been delivering high voltage training for the last decade in the NMCI. This appears to be a newfound genre for a lot of other colleges nationally. But the maritime industry is not in any way a stranger to high voltage. Most modern ships now have high voltage requirements, and it's something we've been delivering, as I said, for over a decade now in the NMCI. And we look forward to modernizing and developing those capabilities as we upgrade our various workshops. And I think that allows opportunities then both for people upskilling and maybe developing new skills. So maybe touching on something Leo mentioned with the offshore working groups, we chaired the future skills group that's working with the FIRS, DETI and TEC. And what we're looking at is that essentially there's three fundamental pillars. So you're going to have people who are currently qualified, experienced, and want to maybe transition quickly into the ORE. So there's your pillar one, which will be very important. Pillar two will be maybe your students that are currently in the CEO system, maybe from 5th year upwards, that are making those life decisions, maybe even in college, and are starting to maybe get a better understanding of what the ORE future careers are. The third pillar, which is to me is the most important one when you factor in timelines, deliveries, and where Ireland's going as a country, is actually the primary schools. We need to spend time getting out and getting face time with young people and making them aware of what is an offer in a maritime career. And if I may add, my children go to a country school. There's plenty of posters from Teagasc and outlining the benefits of a career in agriculture. Why aren't we seeing that for maritime? So again, it can be done if we have some joined up thinking and maybe a centralization of how we deliver some of these training objectives. I suppose potential disciplines where we're looking to, again, the picture earlier at the start of the brief said it all. Robotics, autonomous vessels, etc. is where it's going. And smart maritime, something we're working with MTU Cyber Skills, is how you defend a port from cyber attack and ships. A lot of ship systems now are electronic based, which means they are prone and can be kind of spoofed. They can be interfered with. So again, it's making mariners aware that these risks do exist. And it's just acknowledging that the industry itself has massively transformed in the last 20 years. Next slide, please, Liam. To give an example of kind of some of the points I've been making about it, it's just to give kind of one kind of risk that exists. So the screen you see in front of you is how we look at so as part of our training, we need Irish-based cadets to go and spend time on the ship. So we've tried to give an example here of an LNG carrier based in the UK from an Irish cadet and a UK cadet perspective. Under the current system, ship owners in the UK can recover up to 15.7% of the costs through the ICE scheme, which we work closely with the IMDO on delivering. In the UK, that's 67% of the cost outlay under the UK smart system. Again, just to show within the industry itself, there can be slight discrepancies. A cruise company, again, based in the UK, from an Irish cadet, 14% of the cost outlay is recoverable and 63% of the UK is recoverable. Again, a lot of companies that we've worked with, particularly shipping companies, are telling us that not to commodify students or people, but the product that we perform or produce is very good. And we're very proud to say that we have 100% employability across the maritime sector with our graduates. But again, I suppose as a nation, we need to do more in incentivizing shipping companies to take Irish students. And going back to Leo's report, your harbour masters, your pilots, your future supply chain operators, a lot of them will have or need experience in the maritime domain or the maritime sector. And it's important that we create this tunnel or this pipeline where people can come through and progress. Next slide, please. So I suppose, what are we doing in the NMCI to answer some of these questions? So we've just commenced the complete renewal of our simulation system in the NMCI. That's a project that should be completed by the end of the year. That will see a full modernization of our ship and bridge simulation suite, including the addition of a new Mini 360. It'll also see an inclusion and a modernization of our engine room simulators. That'll be very important for ports, because as part of that, we'll have all of the various new engine types, LNG, ammonia, methanol. And particularly for ports where they're looking to train people in working with LNG, we'll have the software, the facilities, and the capability to bring port teams down and talk through various refueling opportunities using the new modern, I suppose, modern and future fuel types. As I said earlier in the brief, we're in the process of finalizing a project for modernizing our workshops. Again, that's just modernizing what we have, which are many of the skills required for the offshore renewable energy. We've had huge success with MOU development, and we hope to announce some of those shortly. We're involved on the Irish Steering Committee with the T-Shore project, which is an EU project worth about 480 million euros. Essentially, they're looking to harmonise the technical skills that exist across a variety of EU member states. And again, it's trying to create micro-credentials and courses that allow people to travel with a focus on ORE. Leo has touched on the PVG report. I don't need to touch on that. And as I said earlier, we've been working with IMDO and Department of Transport on a future maritime skills report. Next slide, please, Leo. Pretty sure it's the first slide again. So again, look, I'll wrap it up on that because I'm conscious of time and that other people will want to come in and speak. So again, I suppose where we're going with the college, that's just a very quick overview of where we're going and why. And again, it's all around our purpose and where we are delivering and where we see ourselves delivering into the future. Again, the future mariner will be quite complex. It'll be quite a variety career. We'll have to take note that the skill sets won't be just the traditional ones. You've neurodivergence, you've people used to working in remote operating centres, you've people used to working in shoreside jobs. So again, the demand for, or I suppose, maritime-related jobs will increase as the ORE rollout begins in Ireland. And look, we at the NMCI believe we have a key role in enabling that as we have over the last few years. So thanks very much for that opportunity, Liam, and I'll hand back to you.
Cheers, thanks, Paul. That's great. Yeah, that's a really interesting area, actually, potentially the whole kind of digital and marine piece, and indeed the cybersecurity that's required to protect that digital area. In terms of kind of the future Centre of Excellence, my own opinion, I emphasize my own opinion, is that there's a huge opportunity there for us to take the skill sets that exist in Ireland in the digital space around things like, 4G and 5G offshore comm systems, remote condition monitoring, IoT connectivity, robotic systems to repair those offshore wind turbines remotely, all that good stuff, plus then the cybersecurity overarching protection that's required for that. Again, there's an area where we have really good skill sets nationally. So, Paul, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. And we're going to move on to Caroline Bocquel. Caroline's CEO with BIM, and she previously worked with the Marine Institute, and Caroline and BIM have done a whole piece of work around future skills strategy for sustainable seafood. Caroline, floor is yours.
Thank you, Liam. Don't worry, everybody. I'll go at a bit of a lick today. I know it's the end of the week for many of us before the long weekend. So I am CEO of BIM. If you go to the first slide there, Liam, please. So BIM, many of you will know, is the agency responsible for seafood development in Ireland. So we represent all of the producers in the sector, and I'll go through that in a few minutes. Next slide, please, Liam. So just to give a quick introduction, the seafood sector is an extremely valuable sector. It's one of the most valuable sectors after beef and dairy. It's the third highest sector, equal just up there with horticulture, higher than horticulture, but equal to the drink sector. So it's an extremely valuable sector to the economy. And we have a large number of participating businesses, so just under 2,000 vessels, over 100 seafood processors, but probably the most important figure here is the number of people who are employed in the sector. So we have just over 15,000 people employed. The vast majority of them are employed in coastal communities right around the coast. So about 1 in 8 people, for example, employed around the coast in Donegal are working in the seafood sector. So it's a really important sector particularly to the coastal communities, because the spin-off benefit to those communities of the seafood sector is absolutely enormous. And if it was to be taken away from those communities, they would really struggle to survive. And we're doing a current port study that will indicate exactly what that value is currently to the sector, but it just gives you a sense of the scale of it. Next slide, Liam, please. Okay, so one of the things that we have been looking at in BIM over the last year or so is what we need to do to address some of the challenges of the sector. So we have got a huge number of challenges coming at us, and the biggest one is probably the area of labour shortage. We, like many sectors, are struggling to get people into our business. Certainly into the fishing community is quite difficult. It will be certainly a perception that it's hard work. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to a good work-life balance for many people. And of course, it has changed tremendously over the years. So not only is it difficult to get labour into the sector, and not just, of course, into the fishing sector, but also into even our processing companies around the coast. They're in very remote locations. They can find it very difficult to attract people. But obviously, we now have demands for technical skills. So, for example, we're holding a workshop next Thursday out in Chaga Square. We've brought in, or we're bringing a lot of processors to look at robotics, for example. So these are hugely important skills that people need. They need engineering skills. They are working now in plants that are highly automated. So we need to attract in very new skills that we haven't had before. And of course, with the challenges post-Brexit, a lot of fishers now are looking to be seasonal fishers. So they're looking maybe to work as a fisher for the summer, and in the winter they want a different career. So we're looking more at how we facilitate seasonal fishers. In order to keep these people in the seafood sector, we need to be able to facilitate them and help them to find thriving careers for the other part of the year that they're not working in the seafood sector. And clearly, supply chain management is complex. We are working in a global business, and we're seeing a huge amount of global consolidation, and it's extremely important that people are efficiently managing their supply chains and doing so in a very modern way and making sure that they're optimizing their margins. So we're seeing an enormous amount of opportunity there, but at the same time, we still are seeing a big change in skills demands over the next few years. Next slide, please, Liam. So the core skills that we have are still going to be very much required, but we do need to look at these new market-facing demands. And what we need to do there is we need to attract new entrants into the sector. So we want to attract people not just into the fishing sector, but into the entire seafood sector. So I'll talk a bit about that now. Liam, keep going there. Great stuff. Okay, so Paul has talked a bit about attracting in people from primary school up, and we very much agree with that. What we need to do, though, is tackle this one piece at a time. So what we want to do is come in at a couple of key points into the system here to look at how we attract these people, young people, into the seafood sector. So the first thing that we're doing this year is we're looking at a new transition year program, where we're looking to really try to get into transition years to show them that there's a really good career path and career opportunity in the seafood sector for them. So the bottom picture there, that black vehicle, that's our aquaculture remote classroom. So for those of you who haven't seen it, those sides collapse. So if you can imagine it, it comes back in together and it goes back on the truck that you can just see behind it there. It only takes about 10 minutes to set up. It's a remarkable piece of kit, and what it does is it goes around the coast and it teaches children about aquaculture, and of course, as Paul said about people having sea blindness, a lot of people, even those around the coast, don't understand where their food comes from. So we have a waiting list of 500 schools to use that vehicle, although it does get to 15,000 students a year. The appetite's tremendous. So what we're going to do this year and we've received approval for this, is we're now proceeding with another one of these vehicles, but we're going to have a careers in seafood vehicle. So we're going to bring this round, transition years, 5th and 6th years, to talk to them not only, of course, about the fishing sector, but we're going to talk to them about everything else that they can potentially do, whether they want to be a diver, whether they want to be a seafood stylist or a cook, or whether they want to work on an aquaculture farm, or indeed if they want to be an accountant or a marketer or a software developer. And what we want to do is attract these young people into the seafood sector. And the second thing that we're going to do then is focusing on the third level sector, is for third level students who are in a general stream, who haven't yet decided on where they're going to land. They may be doing science or physical education, or they may just be doing engineering. And again, we want them to specialize in something that's going to bring them into seafood. So these are two of the initiatives we have this year. Liam. Thank you. So another piece that we need to do is, once you're in the seafood sector, we want to hang on to you. We want to make sure that you've got a rewarding career. There's a few things that we're doing here now this year that are very important. The first thing is working with the MSO, which regulates effectively all of our training in this area, to make sure that we're promoting progressive career paths. And a few specific things that we're going to do. The first thing is that we're going to develop an apprenticeship in seafood. These are really, really vital in terms of getting people in early course to be able to sort of develop their learning and their career at the same time. The second thing is that we absolutely need to have a transfer of qualifications model. So we need people to be able to move from the seafood sector into the merchant sector and be able to take advantages of the opportunities that Leo mentioned, for example, in the offshore renewable sector as well. So we need an easy transfer of qualifications model. And then a sort of a quirky thing for the sector that many of you may not know of or understand really, but it's really important in terms of both the pride people have in the sector and also physically having something. Many people who work in the fishing sector, they will have a range of qualifications, many of them from BIM. And they will have worked on a number of vessels, often in different countries, but they have no single record of this. We have this on the merchant side, and we want to simply have it on the fishing side, so people can have this passport, which is a list of all of their qualifications, achievements, and work history. And again, that will help them with their own career pathway. Next one, Liam. Okay, so we're doing a few really interesting projects on the skills side this year. The first thing that we're doing is we're working on tools that are actually going to help recruit and retain staff. One of the key tools that we're doing here is a diagnostic service for the processing sector. So what we have here is we've developed a diagnostic tool where we will go into processors, one of those 101 processors, and we'll simply sit down with them for about an hour, and we will use this diagnostic tool. It's just like an app, a series of questions, and at the end it will give them a list of training courses that they need to do. We then have a framework of people who can provide those training courses. There'll be 20 courses, and we'll provide them to them in their businesses for a half day. So the idea is that we're giving them short, sharp training that they need that's going to help them with their businesses. We also need, of course, to continue to digitize our services, and that's really a given in a post-COVID world, and we're going to keep doing that. But also, we're looking now at micro-credentials. So what we want to do is, when people are doing lots of small courses with us, that we will be able to accredit them and then ultimately be able to build them together and perhaps be able to offer certificates to people on the basis of that. And again, make that career path more attractive. And of course, as is a given naturally for all of us now, building sustainability programs and modules right across the sector. Next one, Liam. Okay, we are also supporting, obviously, inclusion is really important to us. We need to make sure that we're making sure we're as inclusive as possible. So we're doing that by making sure that we've got the right financial supports for people. We've got very generous grant aid available for people. And we're making sure those grants will be launched in about the next month. So again, making sure that we're making it really easy for people to access training, and that financially we're providing the right supports for them, and providing accessibility right across the whole spectrum. And the last one, Liam. Okay, and then finally, we're building strategic partnerships right across the whole sector. So our partnership, for example, with NMCI is really important. So we want to make sure that we're not duplicating courses that others are providing, but that we're enhancing it, and that we're also using some of the expertise that's available internationally to do so. For example, we will be launching our new sea survival pool up in Greencastle in the month of May, and we have got a range of bodies who we're working with, who are very keen to formalise those partnerships with, to ensure that we're using this national asset to the best of its ability. So we're really keen to collaborate right across the sector and make sure that we are using as many synergies as we possibly can. That's it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Caroline. What strikes me about that is I think there's so much the rest of the marine sector could learn from the work you guys are doing, particularly around going into schools and making students aware of opportunities in the seafood sector. I mean, you know, if we could do the same across the broader marine sector, including things like offshore wind, but also the maritime and, you know, other opportunities in the marine sector, I think, you know, there's so much we could learn from the work you guys have done already. I suppose another kind of interesting bit, a really interesting piece there, I think, is the piece around the seasonal fishers. You know, and we know, for example, we haven't been up in Killybegs, that some of the skippers up there who work part-time in the fishing industry also are skippers in their, when the boats are tied up, they are off in Scotland doing CTV skippering work for the oil and gas, or sorry, for the offshore wind industry there. So I think, you know, do you see kind of future careers being almost a blend, if you like, of, you know, people in a number of marine subsectors like seafood, like ORE, maybe maritime as well? Do you see that as kind
yeah,
of...
absolutely. And I think it's not only there. I mean, you've obviously got marine tourism. One of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're working with companies in the aquatech sector. So people who are using technology that they're either developing or they're transferring across from another sector into the aquaculture sector. It's only about 50 years old. It has a huge way to go in terms of technology, and we're working with about 50 separate companies who've got brilliant technologies. And what we want to do is base those companies up in Killybegs, which has got an enormous amount of expertise. But you take those people to Killybegs and you look at the people who are fishing in Killybegs, who are fishing mackerel in the winter months only, and you think, why, with all of that influx of new business, there'll be an opportunity for a huge amount of other marine businesses, whether it's to act as test beds for that aquatech sector, or indeed whether it's marine tourism and everything that goes with that. So I think it is about giving people the choice, the options, and then the accessibility to have whatever sort of fulfilling career that they wish to have. So whether they want to be a full-time fisher, or whether they want to be a part-time fisher, whether they want to do 2 or 3 different things, what we need to do is have the flexibility that we can offer that to them and keep them in the seafood sector, because it's really important that we manage that.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we can keep them in the marine sector in general, that's a huge benefit, particularly to those coastal communities. You know, they might be fishing part-time, they might be working in whatever other sector of marine part-time, but the critical piece is that they're staying in those small coastal communities and they're employed there, and there's the knock-on benefit to those.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Liam. I mean, it's enormous. So, you know, we all understand the huge amount of expertise you have to work in the marine sector. So people who've been in the sector at any part of it for 10 or 12 years, we all want to hang on to those people, because they offer an enormous opportunity to anybody working in any part of the marine sector. So the key piece, I suppose, is that coherence between everything. It's that sort of authentic collaboration that we're actually trying to not necessarily rob people from one sector into another.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're actually looking at it with a big picture approach, and we're just trying to keep the whole cohort having these rewarding, viable livelihoods right across the whole marine economy.
Absolutely. Question came in there from Jenny in the MI. I think it's a great question. Any thoughts on how we encourage more women into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the piece that women have always struggled to get into is obviously the fishing part of it. It's really hard work, and it obviously, we have had some women skippers. We've had 3 or 4 over the last decade, but they are in a minority. But of course, the vast majority of roles now are not necessarily on board about fishing. So you will have, of course, one of the slides I skipped over there due to time is the whole idea of complementary training. So we know that in many cases, the most effective shore managers we have for these businesses are the women generally in the families. And again, we're going to be providing proper formal training to them so they can be recognized for that and access pensions and so on.
Right.
But I think, we've seen women, the majority of the aquatech companies we're working with, for example, are run by women. So we are seeing outside of the fishing sector, we're certainly seeing a lot more women there, but it's something that we can't take for granted. It doesn't just happen. And that's part of the inclusivity and accessibility programs we're looking at. We're deliberately going out and targeting women for a lot of our courses and activities.
Very good. Yeah, we were over in Grimsby last year looking at the offshore wind industry there. It's as you probably know, it's a major base for operation maintenance there for the offshore wind industry. But they have specific programs targeting women. They do women only days, for example, where they bring in female students from secondary schools, and they have their female maintenance technicians talk to them about the opportunities in the industry, and female shore-based staff talking about kind of back office opportunities and work that they do on shore. So
I think it's really good, Liam, and I think learning from people who are a few steps ahead of us in this respect is a really good thing to do as well. And the best thing we can do here is take the best examples that are out there and try to make them an even better case study for us here in Ireland. So that's something that we're extremely keen to do.
Very good. Listen, thanks very much for that, Caroline. Really appreciate it. We're going to kind of finish up, guys, because we're clock is running down on us here at the moment. But I'm going to quickly run through some Marine Ireland Industry Network training providers. An apology if we've missed anybody in this, but we did try and do a significant trawl through our directory and database to try and find everybody who has skill sets here. I'm not going to go into huge detail on any individual company here, but I am going to flash up the slides so that you get an understanding of who does what. So we're going to start with ASL, company were with us actually in Bilbao last week on the big stand. So they do GWO, STCW training, SOLAS, ISO, MSO, marine-based training, and land-based too. You can read it there, small charter boat training, 5 to 15 meters. And the guys are doing a lot of work in offshore wind at the moment there. They have a significant presence there, based in Wicklow, but I'm sure they probably work across the country. This is Falcara, Frankie Velman and Noreen Velman in Falcara. This is the Errigal Training Centre. Was up there about 3 or 4 months ago. Really interesting centre of capability. The guys do GWO courses there. They do sea safety audit training. They do, again, training for onshore and offshore maintenance technicians for the wind industry. And like I say, based in County Donegal. Man well known to this parish, VHF.ie, and training there around GMDSS and radio operation, also navigation, coastal navigation, yachtmaster offshore, coastal skipper, that kind of stuff. That's Patrick, based in Clare here with me. Rowan Maritime. The guys are doing radar training, VHF, navigation, first aid, boat tuition, marine diesel engines, and again, the coastal skipper and yachtmaster theory and workboat skippers. The Killybegs people, Marine Training Hub in Killybegs. We are up in Killybegs, actually. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Able seafarer, medical training, security training, sea survival, maritime leadership and resource. resource management, STCW again, navigation, engines, search and rescue training, rib capsize recovery. I've done that one, and it's a challenging one. Confined spaces, deck cranes, and so on, slingers. And that's kind of our roundup of members who have training capability. And apologies if we missed anybody there. We'll do our best to remediate that if we have. Huge thank you to Leo, Paul, and Caroline for their presentations. Really interesting. The thing has been recorded, so if you want to have a look again at what was covered there, that won't be a problem. We'll send out the link to the recording. Huge thank you as well to Jenny in EMI and Edel in IMDO, who are key partners in terms of supporting MIIN and help us with all this stuff. And as always, I have to thank the guys in Blue Eyes Marine. So Kelly, Mairead, and Sinead, who do a lot of the very heavy lifting behind the scenes here, the very unglamorous stuff that makes all this happen, keeping the website up to date and all that kind of stuff. Also, thanks to Owen there, who helped out on IT from the Enterprise Ireland IT department. Going to finish up with this final slide here, guys. If you are in the marine space in Ireland, the marine industry space in Ireland, and you are not on our directory, you should be, because we now have about 250 plus companies involved. Kaylee is determined we're going to make it to 300. So it's anybody who has a professional marine involvement in the country. We're happy to sign you up. There's no cost involved. It's very straightforward. We are always looking for news stories. So if you've launched a new product, for example, or you've signed a contract, or you've entered a new market, or you're doing an interesting piece of R&D, or whatever it might be, do please get in contact with us and let us know about that. We are on we have the website, but we are also on social media. You'll be delighted to know that Kaylee and Mairead handle that side rather than me, because I would make an utter mess of it if I were let loose on social media. But we are on LinkedIn, and we are on Twitter/X, whichever one you have. We also have a marine jobs facility there, and if you're looking for people in the marine sector, or you have, or you are a person in the marine sector and you're looking for maybe a new role, or you're overseas and you want to come home or whatever, have a look at the website, because we do now get a very high proportion of the jobs that come into the marine sector. They're inevitably appearing on our website. If we didn't get to the questions, I know that some questions came in and I did miss them because I was watching the main screen here. We will try to answer those separately for people, okay? So our next event will be hopefully a face-to-face event. We know that people really like the face-to-face events. We are looking at Killybegs, possibly June, although June has become a manically busy month between offshore wind and all sorts of other things. But we hopefully get to Killybegs in June. Caroline was talking about it there earlier, about the seafood industry there, but there's also behind that seafood industry in Killybegs a huge marine engineering capability, which is very relevant for all sorts of areas of marine, including offshore wind and maritime and lots of other things, and lots of interesting collaborations happening in that part of the world. So we want to go up there and have a look at that. One other thing of interest, there is a new organization has just been set up in Northern Ireland, which is actually very similar to our own MIIN. It's called NIMO, N-I-M-O, which I think stands for Northern Ireland Marine Organization or Maritime Organization. Not 100% certain about that. But the official launch is in a couple of weeks' time. I am going to Belfast to be there. I think there's a really strong logic in us forming a relationship there. It's a whole island opportunity, and I think we should definitely be working with those people to kind of maximize the greatest possible opportunity for everybody in the marine sector on the entire Ireland. So I think that is from us. A huge thank you for everybody who attended. We have had 60 people or so throughout the event, so people are obviously interested and wanted to stay online and kind of hear what was going on. Do keep an eye on the website. We look forward to meeting you, hopefully face-to-face at the next event. And in the meantime, have a fantastic Easter. Enjoy yourselves. Get some time off if you can. I'm looking forward to some time off. And like I say, we'll see you at the next Marine Ireland Industry Network event. Feel free to get in contact in the interim if you need to, and we'll be happy to do anything we can to help basically the sector. Okay, so take care, everybody, and good luck. Okay, guys, I think I'm offline and I'm going to shut down unless anybody has any.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
Thanks.
care.
For a great weekend. Take care.
Thanks for
Cheers,
everybody.
Bye. Bye.